Imagine this for a moment. You're standing in a quiet wedding chapel, your whole future balanced on a single breath, when the most unexpected voice in America stops time itself. That's exactly what happened on June 12th, 1972, inside the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, where glamour ruled the casino floor, and Dean Martin was headlining another sold-out night for thousands of cheering fans. Just floors above the noise and neon, a different kind of moment was unfolding. Thomas and Catherine Reynolds weren't celebrities, weren't wealthy, and weren't looking for attention. They were two young strangers in love, holding hands with trembling fingers, having scraped together just enough money for a simple ceremony. No orchestra, no flowers worth mentioning, no crowd, just 10 wooden chairs, a justice of the peace on his seventh wedding of the day, Catherine's sister clutching a tiny bouquet, and two hearts hoping that love would be enough. While Dean Martin rested between shows, feeling restless in a way he couldn't explain, he wandered through the hotel, drawn back into the humanity he'd known long before fame, back when he was just a kid from Ohio. That's when he noticed them, a bride in a modest white dress, crying not from joy but from quiet disappointment, and a groom in a borrowed suit trying his best to be strong. When Dean overheard Catherine whisper that she didn't need anything more, that Thomas himself was enough, something shifted inside him. Without hesitation, without calculation, he stepped into their story. What followed felt less like celebrity intervention and more like fate stepping forward in human form. Dean offered not money or advice first, but presence, his full, undivided attention. And then something far greater, his voice, his time, his heart. Minutes later, in a tiny chapel never meant to hold legends, Dean Martin stood beside the altar as Thomas and Catherine exchanged vows. And when the words, "You may kiss the bride," were spoken, he sang "Everybody Loves Somebody" without a microphone, without a band, and without an audience beyond three overwhelmed souls. It wasn't a performance, it was a blessing, pure and unfiltered. He left as quietly as he arrived, slipping $100 bill into Thomas's hand for dinner and asking for nothing in return, not even thanks. That single act of kindness didn't fade when the applause ended downstairs. It followed Thomas and Catherine for 50 years, shaping how they lived, how they loved, and how they gave. They became the couple who helped quietly, who lifted others anonymously, who turned generosity into a family legacy passed down to children and grandchildren who never knew why kindness felt so natural to them. Until their grandson found a photo marked with five simple words: "The day Dean saved us." When the truth finally surfaced half a century later, it became clear that Dean Martin hadn't just sung at a wedding. He had changed the direction of an entire family tree. He reminded the world that real greatness isn't found on a stage, in headlines or under spotlights, but in the moments when no one is watching and you choose to be kind anyway. The Sands Hotel is gone now, the chapel reduced to memory, but what happened there still lives on, in every act of generosity inspired by one quiet song, in every stranger helped without expectation, and in the enduring reminder that sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't fame at all, but the decision to see someone, to stop, and to give a little magic when it matters most. And if you listen closely to the way this story keeps breathing long after the final note, you begin to understand that the real miracle wasn't Dean Martin's voice echoing through a chapel never meant for legends, but the quiet decision that followed it, the invisible promise Thomas and Catherine carried with them as they walked back through the glittering halls of the Sands Hotel that night, still dazed, still holding hands like the world might vanish if they let go. They didn't talk much at first, sitting across from each other in a restaurant they never imagined they'd enter. Champagne glasses trembling slightly as if the moment itself hadn't fully settled into reality yet. And somewhere between the first bite of steak and the shared laughter that finally broke through the disbelief, they understood something profound had been handed to them, something heavier than money and brighter than luck. That understanding became a compass for the rest of their lives, guiding choices large and small, shaping how they treated strangers, how they raised their children, how they measured success, not by what they accumulated, but by what they gave away. Over the years, when times were hard and money was tight, they remembered a man who had everything choosing to stop for two people who had almost nothing, and that memory softened resentment, erased excuses, and made generosity feel not like a burden, but like gratitude in motion. They never spoke Dean Martin's name when they helped a young couple pay rent, when they slipped grocery money into a stranger's cart, when they welcomed someone into their home for weeks that turned into months, because the point was never the story, it was the feeling, the echo of that song still humming beneath ordinary life. Their children absorbed it quietly, watching kindness modeled without lectures, learning that love could be loud or silent, but was always deliberate. And their grandchildren grew up assuming this was simply how the world should work, that if you had the ability to help, you did, and if you didn't, you found another way. When the truth finally emerged decades later, it didn't feel like a revelation so much as an explanation. A missing piece clicking gently into place, and suddenly every generous act traced itself back to that chapel, to that unannounced song, to that moment when someone powerful chose humility instead. Even the people who heard the story years later felt its pull because it reminded them of something easy to forget, that kindness doesn't need witnesses to be real, and impact doesn't require permission or planning. Dean Martin never intended to create a legend that night, never imagined his quiet detour would ripple outward through time. But that is exactly how legacies are formed, not through grand design, but through instinctive humanity. The hotel staff who later recalled his humming, the security guard who noticed the peace on his face, they all sensed something had shifted without knowing why. And perhaps Dean himself understood it best of all, returning to the stage lighter, not because he had escaped responsibility, but because he had fulfilled it in the simplest way possible. Long after the sands was demolished and the neon dimmed, long after the applause faded into history, the lesson remained intact, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, generation to generation, proving that sometimes the most important performances happen off stage, in rooms too small for fame, in moments too private for applause, and that when someone chooses to see love, honor it, and amplify it without expectation, they don't just change a day, they quietly rewrite the future. And even now, the story continues to move quietly through time, carried not by fame, but by intention, by the simple choice to notice someone else's fragile moment and step into it with kindness. That night taught Thomas and Catherine that love grows strongest when it is shared outward, not guarded inward. And they spent their lives proving that lesson in small, steady ways. One song in a hidden chapel became a lifelong echo, reminding everyone who hears it that true magic appears when compassion interrupts routine and turns ordinary moments into something unforgettable. And so the story continues wherever this memory is carried, because every time someone hears it and chooses patience over pride, generosity over indifference, or compassion over convenience, the song begins again in a different key, softer perhaps, but just as meaningful, reminding us that the greatest impact we can have often comes from pausing, noticing, and acting with love when no one is asking us to. And that long after voices fade and buildings disappear, what endures is the way we made others feel, the quiet magic we chose to give, and the legacy of kindness we leave behind. And so the story endures, not as a tale of celebrity, but as a reminder that compassion, when freely given, outlives applause and architecture alike, living on in choices made daily, in kindness offered quietly, and in the simple truth that love, when shared selflessly, multiplies far beyond the moment it begins.